Hey, Through Crosses family, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Pastor AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship. And today we got a very special episode on this podcast. We're going to be unpacking the vision that we heard from Pastor Danny on Sunday, recapping Vision Sunday. We're going to dive into the nuances of the vision here in this podcast episode. But before we get into that, we'd love for you to fill out our podcast survey. Go to threecrosses.church/podcast. We've been loving hearing from you guys. We'd love to know who you are, where you're listening from, and you can redeem a free drink at Neighborhood Coffee. And so we got a great conversation in store for you. With that, let's go deeper. Joining us to unpack Vision Sunday, Pastor Danny. What an exciting Sunday that was.
Fantastic Sunday. This is I've been so excited to share this vision with everyone, and I'm so glad we got to do it.
Yeah, usually on the podcast, we spend time unpacking a text, but I want to start off with the text that you brought us in Psalm 78, because it does recap a lot of really cool things. In Psalm 78:4, it says, "We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done." I love this emphasis on passing on the ministry to the next generation, telling of the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, the wonders he has done. And I love that this whole thing about Vision Sunday, you would think we're jumping right into the future. It begins with the past. And so you kicked us off with the history video. Why did you feel like it was important to talk about this big Vision Sunday by starting us off with the history video?
Two reasons. One, I think as we see in this psalm, the psalmist finds himself between two worlds, that the God of Israel has been fantastically faithful to his people throughout generations, and we can't forget that. But at the same time, you look back at the past, you see God's marvelous deeds, and yet the psalmist is saying, hey, but the best is, in a sense, yet to come. It's not like our religion is a thing of the past. God is still at work into the future. And so we find ourselves moving into the future, excited about the past, moving into the next generation, recognizing there are generations before us. And so part of that is just recognizing kind of the stewardship of standing between these two worlds. I think the other reason is because in times of change and in times of vision, a lot of times we feel a little unmoored, right? Like, is the church's vision changing? Are we doing something new, different, scary, bad? Are we becoming something different? And I think it's just important for us to see that, especially here at our church, we've had such a consistent line of God's faithfulness and our core principles and values as a church that those things, ministries have come and go, have changed, but the core has always been the same. We've always been an innovative church wanting to reach the next generation with the gospel. So I think part of that for me was not just to celebrate God's faithfulness in the past, but also just to remind our people that anything we do into the future is not a deviation. It's really a continuation of stepping into the DNA that God has given us as a church, as an organization, as a people.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the full-length version of that history video, I'd encourage you to go online, check it out. It's on our webpage. I believe it's threecrosses.church/history, and you'll be able to find it. You can also attend the Next Steps class. The Next Steps class, we walk through the history video and, talk about some of the current things that we're doing right now, encouraging you to take a next step based on what has already been done. It's following suit in a lot of ways. And there's some really cool stories in there. There's so many different things that are illustrated in there, whether it's the port of call, the move to Castro Valley, cafe space on the bricks. I'm wondering on this Going Deeper podcast about the deep cuts of Three Crosses.
Yeah.
Is there something in the video that didn't make it that stands out to you in particular?
I mean, there are so many great stories of our church's history. You know, there's one story that didn't make the video because maybe it's only special to me, but some of the stuff is just like the internal body life stuff, right? If you watch the full-length video, there's a beautiful story about just the community wrapping their arms around a family that was grieving, and that's actually something that God used to grow the church in beautiful and meaningful ways. I think about a moment in our church's history where all the members of the church, in a sense, handed their rights away, right? So we all collectively handed over the authority of church from being a congregationally led church to being an elder representative-led church. And it was this moment where we said, you know what, we're only going to grow if we decentralize what we're doing. And that meant everyone kind of letting go of their own authority or power in the church. And it was just a beautiful gesture that set up the church for success. And I think I love that story because it's a reminder that when we have ownership open-handed That's one of our core values here is open-handed ownership. God does great things when we don't try to grasp onto power or authority. And so humility has always been a core value. Open-handed ownership's always been a core value. And you see those things, even caring well for people and coming alongside grieving families. You see those little bits of our DNA as we walk through the history of the church.
Yeah, so many powerful things. And just, you can see the change over time, which is pretty fascinating to watch that video. And so I immediately want to put on my skeptic hat.
Okay, here we go. Wow.
Right off the bat.
Yeah,
right off the bat.
do it.
Because when people hear the C word, change,
man.
It brings a lot of emotions. And maybe you're out there, you listen to Vision Sunday and you're thinking, man, this seems like a lot of changes. I don't know what's happening in the Three Crosses. I don't know what's going on. And so I feel like it's almost like a coin. There's a side A, side B situation. On side A, you might be looking at change and the video and you might be saying, man, look at how God is expanding this ministry. There's just bigger campuses, more effective outreach opportunities, all these different really good things. And yet I can also imagine somebody looking at the same changes and thinking, oh, great, like this church is becoming quote unquote more seeker sensitive. That's a word that gets thrown out a lot for churches. And let me just give you an example. I think of our start with illustrated sermons. Like there was illustrations, but they were tethered to the sermon. So there was gospel centricity, right? You then transition slowly over time to like Easter and Christmas plays. Like those are the Christian holidays. And then that slowly transitions to like Disney plays where like we're trying to get people into the seats. And now that's transitioned into like ice skating and extravaganzas where there's really no explicit gospel tie. And so maybe you're looking at the changes and thinking like, whoa, like what happened? We've like slowly tethered ourselves away from the gospel. Is that like a fair assessment? Like what would you say to a skeptic that is thinking, well, maybe bigger isn't necessarily better. Maybe change isn't all that great. Like what would you say to that person that has this quote unquote seeker sensitive, I guess, attitude towards seeker sensitivity that is skeptical?
I think the irony is, I love that your skeptic is like a church traditionalist skeptic. Like it's not like this total progressive, like atheistic person. And
right.
Someone's like, I want more Bible, which is great. We love the Bible. That's like two of our greatest core values. Every time we bring up core values is the gospel and the scriptures. And so really, even with what you're bringing, we're always saying, how do we stay faithful to the scriptures and hold out the gospel for the next generation? And yet what's funny, why I was kind of smirking as you were saying that, because I was thinking back through all these stories, and your skeptic that you invented is like, oh yeah, man, this ice skating rink is radical. I'm going to leave the church, whatever. It's like, that happened on every one of those iterations, right?
Whoa,
so when we did the illustrated sermons, it was straight like a dramatic presentation of a Bible passage.
Right.
And people left the church in droves. We were almost kicked out of our denomination for doing illustrated sermons. Because they're like, this is not church. You can't do that at church.
Even the introduction of illustrated sermons.
The first thing that you mentioned, the thing that's like, oh, we've departed from the Bible. No, we were almost kicked out of the Christian Missionary Alliance for quote unquote departing from the Bible by doing illustrated sermons. And so that wasn't us being edgy. We were literally just putting on plays that enacted the Bible, right? Anyone today looks at those and they say, that's amazing. That's totally in bounds. But back then it was very against what traditional church was all about, right? And so we were very careful to say like, hey, we don't do this Sunday mornings, we do it Sunday nights, right? It's a different choir, it's a different, like it's a seeker service. And yet it's like looking back, if the skeptic's like, well, we used to be all about the Bible, back in 1945, 1955, when we're doing these things, they were those same skeptics saying, this is too progressive, this is too crazy. So the funny thing is, this has always been an issue. This is not like vision shift. This is how we've always been. We've always been looking for innovative ways to engage with the community. And yet where the scriptures and the gospel overlap with our outreach methods is one of the core values we've always had is we don't want to be a church that does bait and switch on people. We don't want to be a cringy church. We don't want to be a church that just attracts Christian people to come hear the gospel who've already heard it. We want to find ways where we can connect with the community in engaging ways that meet them where they're at, and then have easy inroads to connect folks with the gospel. So, right, an illustrated sermon, they see the Bible in front of their eyes. Pastor can come out at the end and just say like, hey, you just saw this text. Let me tell you the gospel, right? We do an Easter play. Someone sees Jesus crucified, raised again in front of their very eyes. The pastor can come out at the end and say, wow, you just saw this. Let me tell you about it. But yes, then we get to ice skating, right? And ice skating was an outreach that we invented during COVID-19 where we couldn't be meeting inside. We're like, we got to figure out how to gather with people in this community. And so that was always behind the scenes. Our biggest question is, okay, we're not going to do this if there's not an easy gospel connect. And yet part of the difficulty with ice skating was, well, there isn't an easy gospel connect on the ice, right? Because we talked about, well, maybe we can like play the Jesus film behind everyone while they skate, but that felt like no one's going to watch it. Then we actually tried to do some like program at the ice. Nobody really watched it. We tried to like figure out ways that we can like pass out gospel tracts to people while they're there. Didn't really work. Nobody's really engaging with that. So that's how we're evaluating. Maybe this isn't a good outreach because we're not able to connect people with the gospel. And then we stumbled upon this methodology where we said, okay, well, what if we built the whole Christmas season around kind of moving people towards Christmas Eve? Because if we can get folks to come from the ice to Christmas Eve, we can stand there and preach the gospel to a captive audience who are there to hear the gospel. It won't be cringy. Folks won't be leaving on us. They won't be ignoring us. They won't be throwing the pamphlets away. They'll be engaging with. They'll be coming because they want to hear this message. And so after kind of the research development phase of the ice skating rink, we started shifting towards, okay, what if we just say ice skating's just ice skating? Let's make this a fun party for the community. All are welcome. It's super easy, accessible, but let's find ways that every single person who comes out on the ice gets invited to Christmas Eve. And if Christmas Eve is like the biggest service we've ever had, then we know it's working. If Christmas Eve is no bigger, then we're just having an ice skating rink for no reason, right? And so sure enough, the first year that we leaned into that, Christmas Eve service we never used to have Christmas Eve services because we'd always have the Christmas pageants. So it was new to us and it was gigantic. And the next year was even bigger. And like this last year, it was bigger than Easter, which was like, it was our biggest Sunday of the year. And so it's what we've seen is the ice skating rink has kind of fit into this mold that we love to find throughout the ages, which is something engaging the community will come to without feeling cringy about it or arm twisted or bait and switched on it. But then when they engage with it, we have ways to invite them in to hear the gospel, and we get to see people hear the gospel and respond. And so we always kind of look back at those events and say, we know they're working if when we have Celebrate New Life Sundays, people say, hey, my first thing I ever came to was that. And sure enough, after that Christmas Eve service, we started hearing in the baptism tank, man, I came out to ice skate and then I got invited to Christmas Eve. I heard the gospel. I gave my life to Christ. And we're like, okay, this is working. Just like the illustrated sermons, just like the Christmas pageants, just like Mary Poppins, which is the same thing. We can share the gospel. Folks are responding. This is amazing. It fits like everything else.
You might be thinking, okay, what does this have to do with Vision Sunday? But I do think it's the same philosophy under the thought here. Like all the same things that you described is the same philosophy that goes into where we are now in terms of looking at the context. I'm thinking of the word contextualization. That's another word that gets thrown under the mud a little bit. What would you say, like, in terms of your thinking of contextualization, in terms of where this led to Vision Sunday?
Yeah, that's a great term, because contextualization is really, how does the gospel work in this context? And I think that is what we've constantly had to reiterate and reevaluate is, we could put an illustrated sermon back together like we did in the 1940s, but we found out eventually that people didn't want to come to those anymore. And so it's like, do we want to be the church that holds on to this model even though no one's coming anymore? We're just going to do it because that's what we've always done. Or do we want to say, you know what? This is just a method. It's not like the Bible. It's an illustrated sermon. Like, let's find a new way to engage with the community. And so part of what we see even in that history video is throughout every generation, we're asking, okay, when things stop working, we don't need to hold on to the model. It's just a model. Let's ask what's something else that can work in this new generation. And so contextualization if that's a new word for you listening, when we talk about that in a Christian context, really what we're saying is we know that the gospel answers all of the questions, the deepest questions of our life and soul. Contextualization is, how do we design a ministry that answers the questions that people are actually asking in this time and place connected to the gospel, right? And so, you look out at the Bay Area today, people are lonely. They're asking about community. People are in a post-truth world looking for real answers and a real spiritual foundation. They're spiritually seeking. Like, I don't know if they want Jesus, but they're like, there's got to be more than what meets the eye, right? More than what can be explained. So these are the questions people are asking. And as Christians, we're like, oh my goodness, like the gospel has answers to all of these questions. And so really it's, how do we get these answers in contact with people in the real world and really start to have some of these conversations? And so that's where places like the cafe has been a great place to start building community that lead into conversations. Some of these vision pieces we'll talk about today are ways where we're just sensing things happening in the community and saying, how can we get into people's worlds, into their neighborhoods, into their workplaces, into their homes, and have an opportunity to have conversations around faith, and answer some of the questions that people are already asking about God, about the gospel, even though they don't know the answer is Jesus yet.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I have this vision of, we have the gospel message as the church, and yet there's like this gap between the people out there. And contextualization is like, okay, what do they need? Trying to figure out what their longings are, and then us building those bridges no matter where they pop up. And so my question now turns to Vision Sunday. One of the things I was really fascinated, as you were thinking about how to bridge the gap with the community, how to become a regional church that transforms the East Bay. That's what we've been saying is our mission statement for the last couple of years. So walk us through how you received this vision. What are some of the steps along the way? Take us into the mind of Pastor Danny Strange.
I love it.
Take us along this journey. How did you receive this vision?
I'll give you the short version because I actually did a long version. I was invited on this podcast that's even larger than this podcast.
Oh man, there we go.
It's called Leaders in Living Rooms. I
can't even fathom a podcast.
I know. And I am the most unimportant person on that podcast. They've got some great guests, but they invited me on to talk about this very question. And so if you want to listen to that, I think it's episode 133 of Leaders in Living Rooms, talk about this. But yeah, the real short version was, I find my sense, we, like you said, we had this vision, transform the East Bay with the gospel. And that was coming out of COVID. God has called us to be a gospel preaching church, a healthy church, a regional church. We want to transform this region. And I found myself watching as God did marvelous things coming out of COVID. Our church is, bigger than it's ever been. People just coming, and they're coming to faith. All different kinds of people. Our Spanish ministry is exploding. Kids ministry is exploding. Folks are coming to the church who we've never met folks from that country before, another part of our church, right? It's awesome. And yet I started hearing a question more and more from folks who were coming to church, which I would share the vision, transform the East Bay. And people started asking, man, things are great here, but are we really transforming the East Bay? Or are we just doing a good thing here, right? And it was never like a real pointed question. It was just, hey, we always talk about transforming the East Bay, but it's a big world out there. Oh, what are we doing to really make an impact on this region? Do you think we're actually impacting the entire region for the gospel? And on one hand, I could say, hey, you know what? We got people here from every crack, corner, and cul-de-sac of this region. They're driving up. It's awesome. But on the other hand, I think they had some merit to that question of, we are making a primary impact in kind of this 238 corridor. So Hayward, Castro Valley, San Leandro, San Lorenzo. But we got folks driving in from Oakland, from Alameda, from Fremont, from Pleasanton, Dublin, San Ramon, all this whole region. And we're not really making an impact on those cities as much as we are on these cities that are just, half a mile away. And so part of that was just me starting to wrestle with, okay, God, if you really have called us to be a regional church, if we were honest, we aren't as impactful in the entire region as we feel like we're primed to be from just the location and the history, the legacy, the stewardship you've given us. And so what would it look like for us to lean into this regional vision? What's the next phase of that? And so this just started with me kind of asking those questions to the Lord probably about a year ago. Just started going on some walks and journaling and praying and doing some weekly fasting around that. And kind of, last December, as some of those thoughts started to come together, I just kind of wrote some basic sketch stuff on things down on a napkin. And then I met with our elders in January and just said, hey guys, I've been praying about this. I laid out kind of these 3 words: send, partner, expand. We talked about on Sunday. And I said, here's kind of what I'm sensing. What do you guys think? And everybody's like, yeah, this seems like God is tapping us on the shoulder. We should lean into this. And so we invited the rest of our elders into that conversation, our pastoral elders, and just wrote up probably 6 months of prayer requests and just said, every week we're going to pray for one aspect of this vision. We're going to fast for a day around this. And so probably 30 of us who are part of a fasting team, we sent out every Sunday, we send out those prayer requests to the fasting team. And so probably 3-4 months, we just started praying and fasting. And along the way, every conversation I had just kind of lit up. So the board was like, this is awesome. Our pastor's like, this is awesome. These prayer requests are like, I can't wait to pray for these things. And then I'd go talk to a church planner in Hayward. First conversation is like, this is amazing. He's like, I know churches that are falling apart all over the East Bay. Let's figure out together how we can help these churches. He's like, he told me I got 30 churches between Richmond and Fremont that just want to hand their facility to me. I don't know what to do with them. Maybe we can figure it out together. Then I go and talk to a church planner in Berkeley. He's like, I can help. He's like, let me just come up to your church a day a week and I'll help you guys. I'm like, oh my gosh. So this guy, Ray Hudson, he's been on the podcast. He's been up here 2 days a week, just hanging out with us, helping us build this vision. Just everyone we talk to is like, this is amazing. We want to be involved. All those are green lights for us. And so finally, after probably 2-3 months of prayer, fasting, right? Even you came up after our initial conversation, just said, hey, some of this stuff really resonates with with my calling. I feel called to reach some of these cities in the East Bay. I'd love to take a next step in my leadership. I think maybe I could be one of these campus pastors. And so we're like, let's make you the first campus pastor. Let's figure out what that means together. So all of those initial conversations were like, yes, 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 yes. And so finally we just said, okay, let's build a first wave of a plan, and let's share that with our staff. Let's share that with our congregation, and let's start to pray a little more widely about these first 3 movements of what they might look like.
It's so powerful to listen to those stories because when you hear Vision Sunday and you have your senior pastor come up and say, this is the vision I feel like I'm getting.
It's like a mountaintop or something.
Like all of a sudden, like, oh man, what's going on? But seeing how the Lord has put different people in that path and like greenlit that vision seems really powerful. Is there any other moments that you can think about that like, man, this feels like the Lord is moving in a lot of ways?
It's every moment of this whole process, right?
Wow.
Like, I was I can't even tell all these stories because some of them, like, they just literally happened. I haven't told anybody yet. But yesterday I was talking to a guy on the phone about his ministry, his life, and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, man, I just feel compelled to connect with this guy. I just don't know how to, kind of bridge that gap and step into a conversation. So I just prayed God just to help me to just find a way to connect with this guy in real life, not just like texting, but in real life. And so, I got off the phone and just told a guy, hey, I've been praying, whatever. Get off the phone. I walk into a coffee shop out in Pleasant and the guy's sitting right there.
Whoa.
I'm like, whoa, what's going on, man? He's like, we like, hey, good to see you in real life, right? I'm like, let's grab lunch, right? This happens like now, ever since this vision came out, this happens like literally every day, right? I had another one today where it's like, a guy was telling me, man, I'm just trying to figure out what to do with my church. I want to hand it off to somebody else, a new congregation to come and gather in this place. We want people to keep worshiping in this building.
Wow.
And I'm like, hey man, what church is it? He told me, I'm like, hey, 2018, I actually sat on your church parking lot and prayed that God would give me an opportunity to help find a pastor for your church. Like I wasn't even thinking about that vision back then. I don't even know why. I just pulled over and I just felt compelled to pray, and like, here we are. Right. So it's like, this happens like, I'm telling you, this happens like every day. And so what I love about our church is that we don't, I learned this from all those who have gone before me. We do not follow some pastors like dreams. We're not like, I got this thing on the mountaintop. We don't have Vision Sunday once a year. It's like, just when God leads us though, we want to follow. And so we've taken this whole last year to just move real slowly. But part of it, I told our board about 4 months in, I'm like, hey, I am normally very concerned that I'm not outstepping the Spirit. Right now I'm having a hard time keeping up with him, right? Because I have these conversations. I'm like, okay, now I need to have lunch with this guy. I got to change my schedule around, right? It's like, I just feel like these opportunities just keep arising. And so, I think as I've prayed, I've learned to pray, okay, I need to stay discerning, even though it's like things keep falling into our laps every day. It's like not every opportunity is going to be one we jump after, but man, God is just like, it's like this whole process has been like, yes, 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 yes. It's been amazing.
So let's talk a little bit more about those opportunities. You mentioned send, partner, expand. And Pastor Denny, I don't like to admit this, but I feel like this podcast is bleeding into my normal life because when I was sitting in that elder meeting, I had a skeptic question.
Okay, very good.
And so I want to bring it out into the public.
This is the hard thing with like talking about things that are happening right now.
Yeah, because when you were drawing out that map saying, hey, we have people coming from all over the place, all over the East Bay, and you kind of drew this concentric circle around Hayward, San Leandro, Castro Valley, and then it seems like the fringes are those outside, so like Alameda, Oakland, Piedmont, Dublin, man, I'm so bad at
there's
the
like
Bay Area.
Fremont, Newark,
Yeah, all those kind of like outskirt areas. And my reaction is like, what about churches out there? And what that got me thinking is like, okay, I see that Three Crosses has this heart to reach the East Bay, but I'm thinking like, man, I grew up in Alameda, in case you didn't know, and I know that there's churches out there. And so what, according to your research, what is the state of all the other churches out in the Bay Area? Like, what is going on with some of the other churches?
Yeah, there are amazing churches in all of those cities. And I think one of the biggest misnomers, this is one of the first like skeptic questions I come against when I talk to anyone, including pastors, where they say, hey, we got enough churches. We don't need more churches. The truth is we need thousands of more churches in the East Bay. And so I think that's a big part of this is, statistics would say that if you really want to reach an area, fully reach an area, you need one church for every 200 people. That's the kind of the global statistic. Indianapolis, Indiana actually has that. They have one church for every 267. They're the closest church city in America. The Bay Area has one church for every 10,000 people, right? So you just think about the city of Castro Valley. Castro Valley has like 66,000 people living in here. That means to reach Castro Valley fully for the gospel, we need 330 churches in Castro Valley. So it's like, I know like 5 or 6 really good churches in Castro Valley. We need 324 more of those, in Castro Valley. And so, even at the same time, I was at a gathering of Castro Valley pastors today. We were having the same conversation, and somebody said, hey, I actually did some research and I found out that there are 66 churches in Castro Valley. And all of us like, what? And this is all kinds of churches, like Protestant, Catholic, different churches, different denominations, different religions. And we're like, wait, where are all of these churches, right? And sure enough, like there are church buildings all over the place. And we might know 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 if we really work hard. But most of these churches, we're kind of scratching our heads like, who's in there? Like, do they have a pastor? Are they gathering? And so part of what we've done this last 6-8 months is really try to do a deep dive into, okay, there are, right? If there are 66 churches in Castro Valley, sure, we still need 324 more or whatever it is. Maybe not 324, but we need a lot more. But at the same time, what's happening in these 66 churches and what we found is, by and large, in all of these cities that we've connected with, because we've done some research into all those cities, there are so many churches that are kind of saying we're on our last legs, right? Like, so that I mentioned that guy I talked to today, he just said, hey, my church is dying. We kind of have 5-10 people left. We kind of made one last, we brought a school onto our campus. We were hoping that would help fund our budget. The school just closed its doors. It's like, there's just a few of us left. I don't know what's next, right? I talked to a church in Hayward the other day that said, hey, yeah, there's 7 of us left. We can't afford to pay a pastor anymore, but we do have some money. So we've been kind of retrofitting our facility just to make sure that if we can get something going, that we still have a facility for it, but we can't afford to pay anyone anymore, but we're here, we have this building. And the truth is, there's a large amount of churches in the East Bay that are church buildings. Some of them are owned by denominations. Other them are owned by the churches themselves. And there are just a small handful of people gathering in there, and they're just starting to ask the question, or they've been asking for years, what do we do next? And so I think part of the difficult conversation is how do we navigate conversation with these churches to say, like, I'm not saying 3 Crosses needs to move into all these churches, but how do we get worshiping communities of Jesus refreshed in each one of these church facilities? Because you look across the bay in the peninsula does not have a church on every corner. The peninsula has kind of already had that stage of church life, and most of the church properties have been sold to developers, sold to different religions, sold to retirement homes, old folks homes, all those things, and been bulldozed. And so all my buddies who are church planters or church pastors on the peninsula, they can't find real estate. No one will zone anything religious anymore. There's no places for churches to meet. So they're meeting in theaters. They're meeting in, Seventh-day Adventist churches. They're meeting all over the place, wherever they can, like squeezing into places. But there's no new buildings. So in the East Bay, we have this opportunity where there are tons of church buildings. The large majority of those church buildings are kind of in the last stage of their life, and they're asking, should we sell this back to the denomination? Should we sell it to the mosque down the street? Or should we sell it to the Hindu temple? Should we sell it to the developer? Or is there a way that we can somehow hand this facility to another worshiping community? But how do we do that? And so part of this vision is not getting a 3 Crosses, right, church logo on every one of those buildings. Part of the vision is helping to work with existing churches to ensure that these kingdom assets stay in the kingdom, these pieces of real estate, so that worshiping communities can be meeting in every one of these facilities. So imagine if Castro Valley, if now we have 8-10 amazing Bible teaching churches, well, there's 66 buildings. So what if we spent the next decade trying to get 66 worshiping communities of Jesus Christ in Castro Valley in churches that already exist? They're already zoned for Christian worship. That would be amazing. And yet, at the same time, even if we got there, we're like, all right, we're at 66. We got to get to 330. So I think on one hand, there is so much room for growth. We need so many more churches. On the other hand, there are a lot of churches and there are a lot of churches praying for some level of revitalization, just asking God, can you send us some people, a worshiping community, so that we can keep this ministry going for another generation?
So remind us of the ratio that you said that is like ideal for reaching the community.
1 to 200 is fully saturated. So the Bay Area right now is 1 to 10,000. There's one church in the Bay for every 10,000 people. 1 to 200 is not really the goal. I think 1 to 1,000 is actually a pretty good goal. So that's 10 times as many churches as we have now. So I think there's about 200 churches worshiping in the Bay. It's like we need 2,000 more, right? And so we need more churches.
So what would be the advantage then because it almost sounds like we're advocating, hey, let's small and like shrink the churches a little bit so that they could meet in smaller buildings that have existed that are kind of laying dormant. Because I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot already on my city, and I commute to Three Crosses anyway. So like, what is the advantage of jumping into some of those buildings? And, you said 1 to about 200 people will reach the city. What does reach really mean? I guess is underneath that question.
Yeah, I think, if the average church, the average healthy church has the capacity to reach about 200 people, right? Three Crosses is like this massive outlier. We're like this isn't real, right? They're like, just aren't churches like this. Most churches, the average church in America, I think is 60 to 80 people. An average real successful church is 200 people.
Okay.
And so it's, hey, you know what? Like the average church can reach 200 people, right? Even if you have 60 people in your church, you're like, honestly, in this building, we could probably reach 200 people with this facility, right? So the whole theory is like, if there's one church for every 200 people, then if every single person in that city wanted to go to church on Sunday, there was a place for all of them.
Okay.
Right. And so like, that's not 100% church attendance is not our next goal. That would be amazing. That's heaven though. What we're looking for really is to move from the 1 to 10,000 ratio, maybe closer to the 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 500 ratio, or even 1 to 2,000 ratio. Right. And so that's still like, if that's way more than we have now. That's 10x the amounts of churches we have now. At the same time, it's like we're just starting to make a dent in our culture if 1 out of every 1,000 people go to church on a Sunday, right? So just recognize that, right? And we're saying there's one church for every 10,000 people. That's not enough churches. That means every church would have to have 10,000 people in them to really reach the Bay Area.
Which is kind of exciting because it insinuates and anticipates that there's going to be a big revival that happens in the East Bay, because then we're going to have places to put people and allow them to go to church.
Right. Which is beautifully what we're seeing. Right. And so it's like we revival is a word we try not to throw around too much in the church world, but because it's a thing and we don't control it, God does it. But I've never seen, I've got a buddy who's a pastor from North Africa, Eritrea. And he's like, Danny, I've never seen in America what we're seeing right now, people coming to Christ in droves. He's like, this is like when I grew up in Eritrea. We just go knock on doors and people be like, oh, I've been praying someone to come share the gospel with me. He's like, that's what's happening in our church all the time. He like launched an Eritrean community. It like exploded. It got gigantic. And then he got invited to be the pastor of the English speaking church. That exploded. Then he's planted like 4 other churches. He's like, this is crazy, right? And so every pastor I talk to is like, man, people are just coming to faith. Right? I was talking to somebody today who just said, you know what, all of a sudden, like this is an English speaking church, like just kind of a Castro Valley church. He's like, we've had all these folks, Mandarin speaking folks, show up at our church. Like, we don't know why. They're just all here. And we're trying to figure out, how do we serve these people? We don't speak Mandarin. And so it's just like this, it reminds me of like Acts chapter 2, where people are just coming to faith or seeking Jesus. And churches are like, we got to figure out what to do with these people, because we don't want to make it hard for these folks who are trying to turn to God. And so almost every pastor I talk to, who's not in that stage of ministry where it's like, oh yeah, my church is in its last couple of years, is like, man, our church is experiencing the most growth we've ever experienced right now. People are coming to faith. And so statistics show that too, especially we have here in California, New York, kind of these more progressive places. And in Western Europe, we're seeing folks come to Christ in droves. We talked about that on Sunday, just especially among the newest generation. There was like 4x increase over like between 2018 and 2024 of Gen Z that are coming to faith or expressing faith in Jesus in Western Europe. It's like there is revival happening around the world. So part of that is like, let's prepare the Bay Area for this revival and make sure there are churches to meet these people.
So if I could recap, it sounds like there is a mass awakening or revival, whatever you want to call it, in the Bay Area. There are current churches that are slowly on their last leg, and there's a lot of passing of hands between these church buildings and trying to figure out, how do we keep kingdom assets in the kingdom? And here we are at Three Crosses with this vision to send, partner, and expand, which I love that, because sending is something that we've always done. We've always looked to, develop disciples that can go out into their workplace, into wherever they go to share the gospel. Partner and expand seems kind of like a new leg to all this. So I'd love to talk about that more. And so with all that, the landscape of everything, you gave us a couple of tangible ways that Three Crosses is looking of moving forward. And so let's talk about some of those. Let's begin with outreach hubs.
Yeah,
outreach hubs.
Outreach hub, yeah.
What is an outreach hub? Talk to us a little bit more about where this idea comes from, what it's looked like in the past, how it's working right now, maybe even whatever stories you have about outreach hubs that make you say like, yeah, this seems like a good use of our resources to plant these outreach hubs, maybe in these places that we can get connected with.
Yeah, I think we talk about the past. If you watch the history video, we talked about the Port of Call. So the Port was a ministry that we designed. We actually bought a single family home, or maybe built it from scratch. I'm not really sure. That was designed to feel like a home, but be able to house like 60 sailors. And so we built this home near our church, and then we bought these buses, and then we started sending the buses down to the Port of Oakland to pick up sailors and bring them back to the port. We'd have dinner, we'd have Bible study, they'd stay the weekend, folks would come to faith, we'd do baptisms, they'd go to church, then we'd send them back to port, they'd ship off the next week or whenever it was. And it was like this little outreach hub, right? It was just like this it wasn't a church, it was part of our church, but it was like, it was not really a business because we didn't make money. It was supported by the church, but it was like this little outreach hub, right? Like this little thing that was designed to do a real specific task, which was to reach sailors with the gospel in a real creative way, connected with the church. And so that's the past version of outreach hub. We do that here on our Three Crosses campus. We have neighborhood coffee, right? So we have this coffee shop that was designed. When the idea came up, hey, we should start a Christian coffee shop, we all threw up in our mouths a little bit. We're like, we don't want a Christian coffee shop. We do not want to pull all the Christians out of the world. We're sent into the world. And then someone on our staff is like, hey, new idea. What if instead we designed a coffee shop for the community? That's why we initially called it Cafe 4. It was for the community. What if we designed it to be a destination coffee shop? What if it's not for church people? What if it's for people in the world? And what if we just try to get people up here to enjoy coffee, and we build relationships with our baristas, with the folks who hang out in the coffee, with our church members in the lobby, and just see what happens. Maybe God will, through these conversations, this organic relationship, folks will come to faith. And sure enough, we launched this coffee shop. It starts real slow. Eventually it explodes. It's taken over our entire 10,000 square foot. They're using our church lobby every day, sitting there having their coffee. Most of the people in the cafe aren't church people. They're just coming up here to get a cup of coffee. But it's amazing to see how God works. Every time we do baptism, someone's like, yeah, I came up to get a cup of coffee. I heard the music playing. I came in, or I met someone. They invited me to church. And so this little cafe was designed to be an outreach hub, right? Not a church, but a ministry of our church that's connected to reach lost folks in the community. So we've done that with our preschool, right? We've done that in a number of ways. And this is a model that's used around the world. So especially in countries that are closed to the gospel. So you go to the Middle East or like a Muslim region or a Muslim country, and you send a Western missionary there and like, how am I going to reach people in this country? It's illegal to proselytize. It's illegal to be a Christian. And so the model that's most often used is business as ministry. Right? Like, I'm going to set up an English tutoring center, or I'm going to set up a coffee shop, or I'm going to set up some sort of business. And through that business, I'm going to put roots down in this community. I'm going to build some relationships. And we're going to trust that through these relationships, God will give me opportunities to share the gospel. And that's especially in kind of a first wave of evangelism in a closed country. Business as ministry, an outreach hub like that, is just a really advantageous ministry model. And so we just thought, hey, in the Bay, where there's some hard ground to kind of till here in the Bay in terms of reaching folks, you've been trying to go and build relationships with businesses in different cities in the church planting thing, right? And a lot of businesses are like, we don't want to partner with the church. We don't want to partner with the church, right? And so part of it's like, okay, well, do we need to set up our own business in the community, right? So it's like, do we need to take neighborhood coffee and plant that in Hayward, or plant that in Alameda, or plant that in San Ramon, and just say, hey, we're going to put a coffee shop here. We're just going to meet some folks in the community, build some relationships, and maybe we can get enough relationships going in this community that we can start inviting folks into a Bible study, or inviting folks to a church campus or to a church plant. Let's be creative about these little outreach hubs that we can design. So we've talked about coffee shops because we've done that already. We've talked about student-facing hubs, right? Maybe whether that's a coffee shop designed for students, or a tutoring center, or maybe like a teen center after-school program, whatever it is. Like, let's see if we can like bring the gospel to people and just say, hey, you know what? You go to Tennyson High School, we got a youth group that's like 40 minutes that way in rush hour, or just walk across the street and we got a tutoring center. Come on in. We got a youth program on Wednesday nights. We'd love to have you. Let's make it easy to reach folks by putting a little outreach hub right there in their neighborhood.
Seems like this is where the contextualization conversation kicks in, because it is really looking for what the community needs at the time and then meeting them where they're at in a lot of ways. Because a lot of people just don't come up and walk into church randomly. They begin at a coffee shop, and then like it's one step after the next step. And so it's amazing how meeting the needs of the community is a great first way into sharing the gospel.
No, and this is the tale as old as time too. Because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, well, classic ministry, it's like you just run a church, you preach the Bible,
right?
And if someone wants to get saved, they'll go to church and they'll hear it or something, But when you look at the early church, right, the first couple centuries of the church, a lot of their outreach model was they just lived their life of faith in the community and built relationships with their neighbors. And folks just somehow like one day turned around and thought like, how did I become a Christian? Right. And so there's this famous letter in church history called the Epistle of Mathetes to Diognetus. And in the Epistle of Mathetes to Diognetus, Mathetes means disciple, so it's probably not really his real name, but talks about of how outreach and evangelism is working. And they're saying, you know what? When people see our integrity as we live our lives different than the world, and they see our charity, the way that we serve the community selflessly, they're going to watch us, and someday they're going to be singing the hymns that we're singing. They're going to be reciting the creeds that we're reciting, and they're going to realize they've been converted. And it's this picture of like, we don't know how it works, right? Like Jesus says to Nicodemus, the wind blows wherever he wants. Like that's how the Spirit works. We're just going to live our lives out loud in the community on purpose. And folks just somehow get wrapped up in that. And like, someone's like, I showed up for coffee and now I'm a Christian. I don't know how this happened, right? And there's all these God stories along the way. But really from a macro level, it's like, yeah, God just somehow blew me by the wind of the Spirit into a coffee shop. I met some folks, and then I was at a Bible study. Then I was at a worship service. Then I was listening to a message that I don't know how it happened, but I'm one of them now. I believe what they believe. That's what they say when they're getting baptized. And so we're just looking for opportunities to step into what God's always doing in the world.
Yeah, and this wing seems really exciting too because it unlocks a lot of creative ideas. The
moment we start talking creative outreach subs, there were 1,000 ideas, right? Which is awesome because part of the vision too is like, I don't know how to do this from the stage, but I love it when people catch the vision who don't work at the church, right? So like we got a business owner in the community who's like, hey, I own this fitness center. What if we could use this to do ministry, right? Or we were talking to a guy who owns a business down on the boulevard. He's like, hey, we got this like food and drink thing in Castro Valley. What if Cafe 4 came down here and served coffee out of my business and I'll just get out of the way. You can use the space for free, right? How do we collaborate together? And so part of it is people are like, I'm already in the community. Like, could I use my business to reach people? It's like, absolutely. Let's figure that out, right? And so part of the dream to activate at some point is, what would it look like to equip our people to live on mission where they already are, right? Like, what if instead of just saying, hey, we want to reach Eden Hospital, let's send donuts down there. What if instead we grabbed all the nurses and doctors and surgeons at Eden Hospital and said, hey, we want to reach the hospital. You're part of our church. How can we help you reach the people at your hospital, right? It's like the Trojan horse methodology. You're already inside. Go and activate for the gospel inside that space. And so the vision becomes most acutely activated when every person who's a believer in our region lives life on mission wherever God has placed them, because God has appointed the times and the places where each of us should live.
What's interesting is we just got done talking about the need for more churches. And so we started the ball rolling with these outreach hubs of getting people in the door. And so I want to transition us into, all right, how do we get them into a like stable, gospel-centered church now that they have developed those relationships, have been invited? Like, we don't want everybody, 20,000, 30,000 people coming to this camp. We wouldn't be able to fit. There's no parking. And so the next part of this phase is church planting. That's one of the ones I wanted to talk about. This might be a phrase you've never heard before out there, church planting. So could you walk through what church planting is and why church planting made it on the vision, the overall vision?
Yeah, I think so church planting is, if you imagine like a church as a seed, you plant it and it grows into something, right? Church planting is starting a new church from nothing. So like not from nothing, it's with God and with usually a group of people that you're planting it with, right? So Jason Wigand is planting a church out of Resonate Church. He's the Hayward campus pastor. He's planting a church called Redeemer Church in Castro Valley. And so he's taken 30, 40 people, adults that some of them are already at Resonate, some of them from other churches, some of them are not even Christians yet. They're gathering together and they're going to start a church together from brand new, from scratch, right? And so that's church planting, is starting a new church in an area, right? And so one of the biggest pushbacks from church planting is people say, well, wait, why do we need new churches? Let's just get more people in the churches we already have. All of the research shows that the greatest evangelistic tool in the world is planting new churches. I don't know why, but I mean, maybe this is like Jesus' model of like going out and planting seeds everywhere. But what we see happening is when a new church comes to town, they call it, this is silly, but they call it the Starbucks effect, right? Where remember when Starbucks was first a thing and Starbucks started coming into communities, and it was like, oh no, when Starbucks shows up, they're going to put all the coffee shops out of business in our community. That didn't happen. When Starbucks showed up, Starbucks made coffee popular, and all of a sudden, all the coffee shops in the community started blowing up. And now it's like, when I was a kid, there was no Starbucks, but there was Bodhi's Java, there was Valley Java. They're still there. They're still there as coffee shops in Castro Valley. And when Starbucks came, it gave a lift to coffee drinking in general. And so we see the same thing happen with church planting, that new churches come into the community. And for some reason, as folks are starting to have more conversations around faith, and there's more signs about churches, a new church in your area, for some reason, God uses these church plants not just to grow communities. Church plants tend to grow faster than established churches. So that's part of it. But then also established churches start reaching new people, don't even know why, right? So they call it the Starbucks effect. There's probably some reason behind it, but it just happens that church planting is a tip of the spear initiative that reaches communities better than any other model that we have at our fingertips, right? And so, you kind of compare that with, you're talking to a church, it's like, hey, we're in our last couple of years, we're down to our last 3 members, we don't know what to do next. We just wish some young families would show up. What most of those churches say to me is, I just wish there was somebody who wanted to start a new church and they can kind of start it right here. And we've come to it, but they can kind of refresh this thing from scratch right here in our living room. And then we could plant a new church, right? And so that's kind of their desire is really how church planting works is, people step into a city, start a new work of God, a church is formed. And it's interesting, right? There are some statistics that say, like businesses or restaurants, most church plants fail. That's actually a kind of outdated statistic, because what the newer statistics show is that when church plants have financial support and they have relational support, something like 4 out of 5 church plants succeed. And so it's a very successful model for breaking ground for the gospel, is putting a new church in a city as long as we're supporting them financially and as long as they have strong relational support with the other churches and entities in the city, because it can be lonely to plant a church.
So talk to us about some of the ways we're already taking steps to get involved in church planting.
Yeah, so I think a lot of church leaders know that church planting is like, this is how to reach a city. And so churches that are like, it's not about building an empire for ourselves, it's about reaching the city, are all about church planting. And so just this last year, probably 8 of us pastors in California got together, just medium, small, large churches, and just said, hey, we're all passionate about church planting. What would it look like if we started a cooperative effort to plant more churches in California? And so we just started hitting up other churches, say, who wants to jump in? And so, right, there's probably 8 of us right now who are kind of the core of this cooperative effort, but we've had a bunch of other churches just start sending money in. So $800,000 has already arrived. And these churches are saying, hey, just use this money to plant churches in California. So it's the California Church Planting Cooperative. And so, right, none of us get paid for running this thing, but it's just, we got together to just say, hey, can we raise the water level of church planting? And so part of what's beautiful about that is every time I meet a church planter, because I've probably met 5 or 6 who are planting churches in Castro Valley, Hayward, San Leandro, San Lorenzo, kind of surrounding areas in the next couple of years. And all of them, I tell, hey, you need to reach out to the team here at the co-op, because we want to get behind you. We want to support you. We want to resource you. We want to coach you. And it's been amazing. I talked to a church planter yesterday or Tuesday night. He's like, man, I sat down with the co-op kind of coordinator guy, and 1 hour conversation taught me more than I learned in 12 years of church planting school. He's like, he's been a pastor for decades. He's been in the church plant assessment process. He's been going to conferences. He's been reading books for a decade on this thing, preparing to launch. And he's like, I learned more in 1 hour from this guy than I did in all of my training. I'm changing the way that I'm planting my church. And it's awesome, right? And so part of this, just this synergistic effort of let's work together and help new churches get launched. And so that's different, right? Like, you don't see Starbucks and Pete's Coffee coming together and saying, okay, how do we raise money so that we can start a Phil's in our area, right? So that's where church is different, right? This is where it's kind of fun. Where it's like, like we know that we're not trying to just build little kingdoms for ourselves. We're trying to link arms together as local churches to say, how we need 330 churches in Castro Valley alone. How do we work together to get more churches in this city? Anytime a church planter says, I want to move to California, how do we say, we'll give you money, just come here, we'll help you, we'll send you people. We want to see new churches get started.
I'm glad you said that line of, we're not looking to put 3 crosses logos on all these churches, but we are partnering with a lot of different people. We're trying to fund them, support them, because it helps me transition into this next one.
The buildings that we put 3 crosses logos on?
Exactly. Yeah. Because part of the model is campuses across the East Bay. And this is where we are extending our footprint. And I'm glad we're addressing this last because you've been able to address the imperialistic skeptic.
Well, it's so funny. I mean, every pastor I know who's passionate about church planting, they say the same phrase. They say, for us, it's kingdom over castle. Like we're not trying to build a castle, we're trying to build a kingdom. And that means that we have to decentralize this thing. We're not trying to get more people to our church. We're trying to get more people into Jesus's church. And so we need to link arms and work together.
Right. So then talk to us about what that means for a Three Crosses campus somewhere else besides Castro Valley in the East Bay.
Yeah. So a Three Crosses campus, right? If we defined a church plan as a brand new church in your area, a Three Crosses campus would be like a new expression of Three Crosses in your area. So like imagine, there's some churches in the South Bay on the peninsula that have a multi-site model. And so they'll say, hey, we're one church. We just meet in various locations. And so you might be at Menlo Church, but you might be at Menlo Church going to their Menlo Park campus. You might go to their Saratoga campus. You might go to their San Mateo campus. They have several campuses all doing the same thing in an effort to reach the entire peninsula with the gospel. So for us, I think it's 60% now of large-scale churches, like they call them mega churches, have a multi-site strategy. Because at some point it's like we're running out of capacity, running out of parking lot, and so we try to plant churches, we send people out, but eventually it's like we also, if we want to keep reaching people, we've got to expand off this campus into a new place. And so the two primary reasons that campusing is part of this strategy, number one, is because we are reaching people in cities all over the East Bay. And so I showed some of those stats on Sunday that we are reaching people from Fremont, San Ramon, Alameda, Oakland, all over the place. And yet still, when you look at folks who are engaged, not just here on a Sunday, not just watching online, but like engaged in our ministry, the grand majority of them still live within like a mile of our church, which means that the farther away you live from our church, the less that you're actually a part of our church. Like you might come on Sunday, you might watch online, but you're not in a life group. You're not going to the men's huddle. You're not, right? It's serving. It's too far, right, to do that. I was talking to that church planner Tuesday night in Castro Valley, and he said, I asked him, why did these people want to leave your church, Resonate, and step into this church plan? They said, it's actually the same story every time. They said, we love Resonate. We love driving down to Hayward to go to the campus. We've tried inviting our neighbors. None of them will come with us to Hayward on a Sunday morning. Like, it's too far. So like when we heard that there might be a church in our neighborhood, we're like, we'll do it because we want to reach our neighbor. And so part of that is like, we want to launch campuses as a tool for people who are part of Three Crosses, and maybe they live in Alameda or Fremont or San Ramon, to be able to say, hey, I go to this great church and we're meeting right there, right? Instead of, we're meeting down that freeway around the corner, 10 minutes down there, then you get off at 238, then you wait in a little traffic, right? And so it's an outreach tool as well. Final reason that the campuses are part of the strategy is, as I started some of those conversations, because at first we just started so idealistic of like, we're just going to go help local churches start their own churches. And I realized pretty quickly that we have to be willing, if we're going to have these conversations, to say, hey, I talked to a church and like, hey, we would love to help you, blah, blah, blah. And then I get to a point where it's like, they start looking at me like, well, can you help us? Like, can Three Crosses help us? And I'm like, oh, geez, like, and I'm thinking I either need to find a church planner real fast, or I need to find a way that I can fund this guy's church or something. Or it's like, I need to be ready if the guy asks me to say like, yeah, actually we can send some staff down. We can put an expression of Three Crosses here, right? And so that's not going to be our primary thing that we do. But I realized through these conversations that it's inevitable that people are going to ask us like, hey, Three Crosses, can you take over this church and help us? And so we have to just have some kind of tool that we can deploy if we're asked to do that. So like I said, that's not going to be our primary tool that we use. The primary reason we would use church campus strategy is really to help folks who are part of our church but live in a different city have an expression of the gospel, like one of those outreach hubs, but an actual church in their city where they can reach their friends.
I know there might be a lot of you out there that have engaged with a multi-site model church in different cities, or it seems like a popular thing nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting. Not a lot in the East Bay. Like in the East Bay, we got Resonate, which has a couple campuses. That's about it, right? The peninsula, you got Menlo Church is a multi-site church, Westgate down in the South Bay, Cathedral of Faith in the South Bay. There's a number of multi-site churches in Oakland, a ton in San Francisco. East Bay, it's like not a model we've seen very often. And so it is not an uncommon model. I know a ton of pastors who lead multi-site churches, so there's a ton of research out there on how to do it well and make it life-giving and all of that. It's a normal thing churches like ours do. But it is new to the East Bay, so it might be new to you.
So what would the research say in terms of like, what are we learning about this multi-site campus model? Like, what are some of the benefits? What are some of the challenges?
It's interesting because at first, like, I grew up in our church, right? you've been here in our church. We all talk about multi-site. We're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. like it's all those different skeptical things.
Sure,
like, is this imperialistic? Are we just whatever?
Yeah.
So then I like reluctantly go and I start interviewing pastors over the last year who lead multi-site churches. And I'm like, what do you like about it? And they're like, oh, easy. Multi-site churches make a large church feel small. So like Phil Eubank, who's the pastor at Menlo Church, he's like, you come into Menlo Church, it's like there's 1,000 people here in the sanctuary. No one knows who you are, right? You might have experienced this here at the Crosses. Somebody shakes your hand, and you love it though, because it's like, it's great, great teaching, great music, or great kids ministry, great student ministry, great coffee, whatever it is. And you like this church, it's easy to access, right? It's good. You love what's happening there, but it's like, at some point, like, I don't really know anybody, right? He's like, but once we moved multi-site, we started having these campuses that were more like 200 to 400 people or 400 to 600 people instead of 1,000 to 2,000 people. It's like, and it was just different because they walked in and it still feels like Menlo Church, still great music, still great message, still great kids ministry, still great people, still great opportunities to serve. But he said, if somebody goes to the San Mateo campus of Menlo Church, they come 3 times and the usher is going to recognize them, know their name, know their coffee order, invite them to serve, invite them to their small group. It's like, it makes a big church feel small. And so he said, I wouldn't go back because all of the things that are difficult about being a large scale ministry are better in this multi-site model. It comes with new like leadership challenges. Like it's hard to manage a multi-site church, but in terms of the experience for the person who's coming, he says, most of our folks are commenting that they love our church because it's the same church they've always loved. But now it feels like the things they missed about being part of a smaller church, they have that here in our multi-site church. And so we haven't done it yet, but that's kind of the common refrain that I get is, it feels like everything we love about Three Crosses, for example, but just at a scale where I actually get to know my neighbor, I get to know these people here, and it feels like, right, like that bar Cheers from the 80s, right, the 80s sitcom where like everybody knows your name.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Is that like before your time?
No, I've watched Cheers. It's good.
You looked at me like, what is he talking about?
Sam Malone, man. Anyway, wow, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different moving pieces. There's a lot of vision, I would say, and a lot of great ideas. I can imagine, again, the skeptic that has that feeling about change, thinking, man, I really just want Three Crosses to stay as it is. I really enjoyed coming here. I really enjoy Pastor Danny and your preaching. I really love Ian when he comes up there and his team sings. Like, I'm worried that like, as we pursue this, something about us might change. How would you help somebody feeling that right now? What would you want to tell them?
Yeah, I tell them 2 things. One, I think some of the changes that are coming in the near future, which that sounds real scary, but they're not that scary,
right?
Are actually just making the ministry just better. Right. And so like what we're talking about, like multi-site makes a big church feel small. Part of the conversation we've had, like we're not talking yet about where to launch, like how to launch and when to launch a multi-site church. Right now we're talking about, wait, our church feels giant and scary and people don't connect to each other. Let's fix that. Right. And so most of the changes we're making in these next few months are like, how do we make it so that when someone comes to our church, they are seen, they are cared for, like they are, because how can we expect to go care for someone in another city if we can't even care for someone well here in Castro Valley? Right. And so, chances are, if you're saying I love the church, it's because you do feel cared for and seen. But that's been part of my kind of compelling vision for myself since I stepped into this role as senior pastor is this is a church that feels like a beautifully connected church for those who are connected. But for those who are not yet connected, it just feels like this giant scary thing. And so many of the changes, especially in this initial phase that we're making, are really like, how do we just care well for the people here? Because there's no chance we're going to care well for people out there unless we're caring well for people here. So that'd be the first thing I'd say is like, the change that's coming is actually just like getting better at caring well for people who are already here. Second thing is like, I get it, right? Because no one really loves change. I mean, some people do, but a lot of times it's hard for things to change around us. And yet it's interesting. You watch the history video and it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? Even change resistant people watch that video like, I love it. I love the port. But part of what we just have to keep telling ourselves is the reason that we continued to grow and innovate is because we kept changing. So like we did have to end the port when the port closed. We did have to end the illustrated sermons when people stopped coming. We did have to end the dramatic musicals when COVID hit. And that's we have these natural endings of these ministries that is never in the midst of that. It's always painful. It was so painful to make all those decisions. And yet that is kind of the regular practice of the gospel, is like death unto life, death unto life. And so I do think one of the things that I see that distinguishes a healthy church from an unhealthy church is healthy churches are always actively dying and resurrecting, and unhealthy churches are holding on to things that are no longer working just because they've always done it that way. And so I think when the church has done it, change in a healthy way, it doesn't feel like things are changing all the time. And I hope it doesn't feel like that here. But things are changing all the time. We're always refining what we're doing because we're realizing that just like any other organism, we are always growing and changing. And parts of us, like our skin cells, are dying and falling off all the time. And so we just try to stay on the cutting edge of that. And so, yeah, we will not make any changes that are out of line with our DNA, our historic practices. We're going to be all about the gospel, all about the scriptures, all about innovating for creativity in reaching the gospel, reaching folks with the gospel. And I don't really think it's going to feel like everything's changing around us. But in a moment like this where we're talking about all these ideas, it's easy for our heads to spin and be like, wait, so like tomorrow I'm going to wake up and our church has like 35 locations. It's like, this is a 10-year vision. And the reason it's a 10-year vision is because our passion is to move slowly but surely into it with the Spirit. That's why we don't have metrics around everything. That's why we're not raising money yet. It's like, hey, we're going to do what it seems like is the next right thing. Then we're going to do what seems like is the next right thing. And we trust that over the first couple of years, maybe we'll launch 1 or 2, and the next couple of years, like 3 or 4, and the next couple of years, 6 or 8. And then by the time we get to year 10, it's like we look around, there's 35 things, but it's not going to be 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. It's going to be a 10-year run and into the future beyond that.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking about what attracts me to this vision as well, of thinking to your explanation of the sprinkler head analogy, of just how this one campus from Three Crosses can reach the vicinity in which it is located, but you have all these different cities. If we're going to be a church that wants to transform the East Bay with the gospel, it's just going to need more and more sprinkler heads, all more and more outreach hubs, more and more church plants, more and more campuses, whatever it is, to see your neighborhood reached. And so that seems like a big key here of what does it mean to be reached? Does it mean like commute 45 minutes on a Sunday, or does it mean experience a life with other people, with other Christians, and walking through things with them and being able to reach them more accessibly? And I think there is something about seeing church that way that this vision brings out, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, just think it's funny is part of what we're resistant to is just change in general.
Right.
But even like with some of that skepticism. So it's like, well, I don't, it feels too corporate to be launching campuses in all these cities. Like, well, hey, I don't know, what feels more impersonal? Is it, hey, I drive 45 minutes on Sunday to a church where I don't know anybody, and then I go home and I don't re-engage with that all week? Or my family and I walk down the street to the church on the corner and we know everyone there, and it's folks from our church back in Castro Valley, but they all live in our neighborhood and we built relationships with them. Like that, that's less corporate. That's just like a better way to serve those people well. Like a sprinkler system is better than a sprinkler head. But it's changed and it's different, and we're going to learn and grow along the way.
Well, this is going to be exciting. You gave us a couple of next steps that we can take, just staying informed, perhaps getting involved, even beginning thinking about investing. And so if somebody out there is just like, man, I can't wait to see what happens. I'm so excited for the next 10 years of Three Crosses ministry. I'm ready to go. I'm ready. What would you say to them? What would you say for somebody out there saying like, man, this is making me think of this church down the street from me. This is making me think of this person that I've been talking to. I have this business idea, whatever it is, whatever ideas are out there. What is going to be the most helpful next step for them?
Yeah, I would say this is not a castle vision. This is a kingdom vision. And this kingdom vision is going to move at the speed of relationships. And so that's what I found is I'm just in a season now where it's like, yeah, if you know a pastor down the street who's saying like, hey, our church is struggling and we're looking to bring in another congregation, tell them to call me. And I mean, I don't know exactly what we would do, but let's sit down together and let me just start making some phone calls and say, hey, do we know of a church planner who wants to move into a building? This pastor wants a church in their building. Let's start those conversations, because I do think we don't have grand plans that we're going to launch 4 campuses next year. And we're really just saying, hey, we're trying to kind of turn over rocks and build relationships and see what the Lord does. And we're going to make the next logical right choice. And so maybe the next logical right choice is the business in your neighborhood, or the pastor that you've been talking to down the street, or a business that you own, or, an estate that you want to give, or whatever it is, whatever that resource is. Maybe that activates the next phase of our vision. So we are moving slowly but surely into these next steps. And so if you want to help in any way, reach out if you've got ideas, contacts, people that we should talk to, but also reach out if you just want to be part of it. So on Sunday, we had an all-in card that I'm sure you can go on our website and fill out. Just say, hey, I want to get updates on this thing. I'd be happy to help launch something in my neighborhood. Whatever it is, I'll give towards this, right? I just want to be all in. And so if that's you, and sign up to be that, and we'll start sending you email updates, and you can start connecting with us on that as well.
Cool. Well, this is exciting. Vision Sunday, Vision Podcast, I guess you can call it. A lot of skeptic questions today.
Hey, that's all right. Things are new, I think I love how you ended with what if somebody's raring to go? Because I think, statistics and real life shows us that there's some of us that just hate change.
Yeah.
There's some of us who love change, and there's the rest of us somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And so wherever you land with that, it's that's normal. That's you. And so if you're, like I said on Sunday, if you're skeptical about all this, I would invite you to pray that God would give us wisdom, that we wouldn't do anything that you're scared that we would do.
Right.
And if you're dude, I'm all in, I'm ready to go, let's go, right? Let's figure it out. And if you're somewhere in the middle, stay along for the ride with us, and ask God to guide us, and ask God to guide you into how you can step in along the way.
And a lot of times in my life, when I've been on the forefront of pioneering something, or on the frontier of something new, it has been the most scary. And yet I've seen the Lord work the most in those seasons. And so I think it's going to be a front row seat to what the Lord is doing right here in the East Bay as we seek to see the East Bay transformed with the gospel. And so it's an exciting time. Pastor Danny, that was an exciting podcast.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. Can't wait. Next week, we'll be back in the Bible again, I believe. Isaiah chapter 6 next week.
There we go. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.